And maybe I'll start again. Good morning. I'm Tom Hopcroft, President and CEO of MassTLC. I'd like to welcome you to our session today. Let's talk about mental health in tech. Now, in technology, we know that our people are our most important assets, and mental health is a concern, even in the best of times. But today, with the rise of COVID, the social justice movement in full swing, there's increased pressure and often reduced support opportunities for mental health. So given the importance of the issues, MassTLC has teamed with MindWise Innovations to put together this four-part series on mental health in tech. Now, as we get started, I'd like to say a quick thank you to all of our global sponsors. These are the companies who really help support, with their time and their treasure, the activities that we do throughout the year to help the technology sector move forward. I'd also like to invite you to join us as we continue the conversation over the coming 3 weeks. Listed on the slide are the dates, and you can see them up on our website as well, with the topics that we'll be covering over the next 3 weeks. So we hope that you'll come back and join us for that. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce Nick Hansel-Snyder from MindWise to review some of the housekeeping items and really kick off the conversation with our guests, Lisa Desai and Dan Tater. So Nick, over to you.
Thanks, Tom. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Nick, and I'm part of the MindWise Innovations team. MindWise provides a suite of digital solutions and consultative services that allow corporations, states, and universities to understand the unique behavioral health needs of their organizations. MindWise is powered by Riverside Community Care, a nonprofit leader in behavioral health and human services. Before we get started, I want to go through a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar will be about 60 minutes long. We've set aside some time at the end of the webinar for Q&A. Please feel free to submit questions at any time during the webinar via the chat box. Please select the Send Question to Staff from the drop-down menu at the bottom of the box. We may answer some questions in writing as we go, but we'll save others for our presenters to answer at the end. Please note that your submitted questions may be seen by other attendees with your name attached. Your audio and video have been automatically disabled for this webinar, so there's no need to worry about being heard or seen during the presentation. After the webinar is over, we'll be emailing a link to view the recording to everyone who registered for today's webinar. Please feel free to share that link with others who may be interested. The email will also include a copy of the slides from today's presentation. Now, I'm excited to introduce our presenters, starting with Lisa Desai. Lisa is the Director of Behavioral Health Consulting here at MindWise. She leads the development of new screening tools and innovative programs with the goal of reaching underserved populations. She's been a practicing licensed psychologist for 25 years, providing behavioral health services to youth, adults, and families. Also joining us today is Dan Tater, founder and CEO of ADK Group, a Boston-based software and digital product development company. As the leader of ADK, Dan oversees both the company's equity portfolio of startup companies and ADK's service business. Dan is also the founder of ADK Charities, a 501c3 organization which operates behind the scenes to provide support and funding to charitable fundraising efforts. And now, without further ado, I will hand it over to Lisa and Dan.
Thank you so much, Nick. And I just want to
Nick.
Excuse me. I just want to ensure that everyone can see the screen that I'm sharing. Hello.
Hi, sorry, this is Sarah. Can you turn that to Lisa? I'm having computer difficulties.
Okay, so I will. Hello, everyone. I'm hoping people can see my screen.
Yes, you're good now.
Yes,
You're
are we
all
all
Lisa.
good? Okay. Nick, thank you for that introduction. This is our first time round, and many of us are not as familiar with GoToMeeting, or webinar style. So welcome to today. I'm absolutely delighted to be here to be talking about this really crucial topic that unfortunately hasn't been focused on enough in any industry. And it's really an honor to have Dan join in this conversation. And we really are hoping this will be a conversation throughout. We'll be touching upon the intersection of the tech industry and acknowledging that that's a very broad, when we say technology, we're talking a very broad industry. So forgive us for sometimes there may be generalizations that are happening. And really looking at how does behavioral health show up at work? How does it impact work? How does it impact all of us? and leadership in the time of COVID. A very challenging experience. And again, really glad that Dan is here to talk about his many years of experience and also how he's addressing those challenges in these times. And again, in these conversations, really wanting to hear from you, audience members, via polls we'll be putting out there, as well as welcome to share your thoughts in chat. So we're actually going to start off with a poll. And so Nick, I think you're going to be launching this. Why did today's topic of mental health capture your interest? So please take a moment to let us know. Nick, are you, I don't think I'm seeing the polling, Nick. Are you seeing some responses?
Yeah, we've got about half the crowd has replied, has responded. So we'll give it a couple more, another minute maybe for people to respond.
Perfect.
All right, everyone, I'm going to close this poll. So if you're going to vote, please vote now, and then I will put the results up on the screen. All right, so here are our results. Lisa, are you seeing these?
I am not seeing the results.
All right, they should be up for everyone. I think your slide deck is probably preventing you from seeing it, but I will give a quick summary of the results so you guys know what's going on. We have 8% of our attendees want to further their professional development. 46% want to ensure they're promoting a tech culture of well-being. 8% are concerned for colleagues or employees. And 38% think that COVID-19 has made mental health a bigger priority.
Great, thank you so much. And thanks everyone for participating. And I think those, the high percentage around well-being, interest in well-being, and the recognition of COVID and how it's impacting our mental health, clearly your responses are really bearing out what people are talking about, you know, in this country, across the world. And also really appreciate those that are here for your own development, as well as concerns about coworkers or friends perhaps. So thank you for that. Quick, just kind of overview. What do we mean when we're talking about behavioral health? So in the industry, behavioral health is thought of as encompassing both mental health and substance misuse. And you know, it's very important to think about mental health on a continuum. And so yes, mental illness is at one end of the continuum, just as we think about physical illness as being something that some of us experience. Most of us are in the middle of that continuum somewhere. And our mental health vacillates based on circumstances in our life, relationship changes, certainly a global pandemic and the national unrest that's happening right now. So, you know, whether it's large or small scale, these situations are going to impact our mental health. And so working through mental health challenges or life challenges very much builds resilience, which is a topic we'll actually be focusing on very much next week. The other piece that we like to emphasize is that mental health and substance misuse can very much go hand in hand, unfortunately. And sometimes it's a bit of the chicken and the egg. Hard to know whether a mental health challenge existed, which led one to turn to a substance to cope, to get through the day, to self-medicate in some situations, or whether substance misuse led to an impact on one's mental health. Regardless of which way that goes, it's important to think about what are the best ways to address that. And it begins often with acknowledgement, accurate information, and a conversation. So from our standpoint, having these conversations in the workplace is crucial. Even as we're working remotely, most adult hours for those that are employed and full-time employed, most of the time you're spending at work or with colleagues remotely. So there's an opportunity to notice what's happening and to also support one another. And again, talking about it is really the best way to think about how to demystify what mental health is and make these conversations happen more easily. So I'm going to put these statistics up here, not to be kind of a downer, but more to remind us that when we're talking about this level of mental health issues that are surfacing, it also allows us to think about really what's, quote, normal, what's normalized, and what's outside of the norm. So important to remember that these are the results of surveys done prior to COVID. We know as a result of COVID, there's been an increase in mental health challenges. The Kaiser Foundation did a study in the last several months that found that a quarter of individuals, adults in the US, are reporting mild to moderate increase in their mental health struggles due to COVID. So with this, Dan, I want to draw you into the conversation and ask you, based on your experience of leading and working in tech and starting companies, what are the unique benefits and challenges of working in tech?
Sure. So I feel that tech has a culture that we all love, and a lot of that culture is also can lead to challenges. So tech, we're often very, very driven people. There's a lot of type A personalities in the tech world, and we thrive under pressure and deadlines and meeting our next benchmark, our next goal, our next deliverable. And I think there's we kind of have this team culture that is both self-imposed among ourselves. We all want to make sure that we're not letting down other members of the team, but can also be driven by things like investors or racing a product to market. And I think that oftentimes some of the things that we love about this space and we love about the companies that we work in and invest in and kind of have fun with, it brings a very interesting personality, fun personality to work with, but it also brings challenges and stress and things that can lead to sometimes some tougher moments.
Yeah, that's incredibly helpful. And, when I think about what you're saying about the pressures and both internally from wanting to do the work and being committed and driven to the work, and also, as you're pointing out, the external pressures of stakeholders, investors, it certainly makes sense that there would be unique impact. So Michael Freeman is a psychiatrist and researcher out of University of San Francisco, and he spent quite a bit of time in his career focusing on and studying leadership and entrepreneurs, very much in the tech industry, and the impact on mental health. And so I'll be quoting a bit of his research throughout today. And, this is quite intuitive, I think, but one of the things that he found is that the key aspects of what really allows leadership and entrepreneurs to thrive, creativity, insight, kind of the executive functioning, like planning, organization, that driven, the analysis, are often, but also can have an impact of, while allowing one to thrive, can also be very impacted by mental health struggles. So, again, Dan, if curious about your thoughts of, we look at these kind of capabilities and talents, how are these impacted by stresses of the tech culture?
Yeah, well, I think, following up on the last slide and then transitioning into this is entrepreneurs, and to be clear, not everybody in a tech company is an entrepreneur, but there's a lot of people who are being led by entrepreneurs, and a lot of the qualities that lead someone to go down a pathway of building a company, putting everything at risk, are also things that don't always play well with how a lot of humans are set up to be. I think it's a unique type of personality. I think it's someone who's looking for, willing to take risks, and when you take these risks, you're really, an entrepreneur is bringing a team with them, and it's a culture around risk taking and really working hard, and it can, the demands can be late nights and it can be weekends, it can be working outside of a comfort zone, which we all like to do, but it's something that we may not all, it may not be healthy to do that as much as what's demanded upon people. And so I think that kind of culture of the race, it's if a team is working on a product release, you really don't feel comfortable being the person who says I need. It's hard to feel comfortable being the person who says I can't work till 10 p.m. for the next 2 nights. I need a break. I need to spend time with my family. I need to do those things. I need to work out. I need to do those things that help me come back to stability. And so I think those demands certainly are expectations. They're hard, and they wear on people.
Yeah. Yeah, and the self-care that you're bringing up, and so much of what you're saying is in line with what I think many of us read, and I know me not being in the tech industry read, and sometimes I wonder, and I grapple with this as a stereotype about the tech industry, but what you're talking about sounds like it's a very real, the long nights, the sacrificing a lot, and sometimes not being as attuned to self-care. So thank you.
Interesting. I would say it's sometimes more than a stereotype, it's a sexiness. It's a part of, and not all companies are like this, but even the companies that promote the culture that they aren't like this, oftentimes when they need to hit a deadline, this becomes, it's innate in the culture of, where we provide lunches, you can work from home and you can sleep in, but also we need to meet a deadline or an expectation, and that kind of overtakes the culture that's outwardly projected.
Yep. And so it's borne out in the research and the information that's out there. So there's an unintended impact of behavioral health. And so we're here to talk about, really today is how do we take the first steps to address this? And believe me, tech is not the only industry that is impacted by this. So in no means are we saying this. We're sharing this to kind of say, let's really focus on this. And part of what, this is what people are experiencing. Part of the problem is that we're not addressing it enough. So more than 50% of those of you in the tech industry are saying that you experience burnout. 1 in 5 have abused or misused pain medication in a non-prescribed fashion. And 50% of entrepreneurs, again, and to Dan's point, not everyone is going to become an entrepreneur. But Dan, when we were talking about this a few days ago, you made some excellent points about when leadership and entrepreneurs are struggling with mental health, how that impacts their company, their teams. I would love to hear more about that.
Well, it's interesting. I think we'll probably hit some of this when we start to talk about COVID around what we found successful with our team in Boston and how we work through COVID. But look, every day as leaders of these companies, and whether you're the entrepreneur or a manager or HR, when you're in a position that you're looked to, when you go into the office and in a mood, and that mood could be coming from a deal that's not working out. It could even be coming from something happening at home. It wears on the office, and it spreads. And it's really one of the things that I've learned over the years is the value of making sure that it's really rare for something to be on my shoulder and for everyone in the office not to notice it. And so I think it's really important that whether it's the entrepreneurs or whether wherever you are as a part of the team, tech has a lot of close-knit teams. You're working very hard and fast together often, and you just need to make sure that you you're not going to hide anything, and you need to make sure that you're able to handle things yourself and ground yourself to keep your team and others grounded.
Yep, thank you. Thanks, Dan. So what are we talking about when we're saying, Dan, you use the word mood, and I think that depression is a mood. It's when our mood is kind of out of whack, if you will, when a mood disorder, really, when we're thinking about the disorder aspect of it. So what does anxiety, depression, and burnout really look like? So here's kind of some descriptives. Some of this will be surprising, some will not. So anxiety, we think of nervousness, excessive worrying. So for some people, it's very visible. You can think about when you may appear nervous, when somebody you know may be struggling with anxiety, it feels like kind of palpable. And other people may be quietly worrying very consistently. So it can show up in different ways. It definitely can have an impact on work, which we'll talk about in a moment. Depression, it can range from not being able to get out of bed at its worst, even feeling suicidal at its worst, to more mild but chronic or low level, kind of not being interested, loss of interest in socializing, not wanting to kind of social distance walk with people when you used to. So depression can show up a lot of different ways. Also different from sadness. Sadness is often a feeling we have as a result of a loss, whether it's a loss of a person, a situation, a job, perhaps. Whereas depression is more of a mood. It's an underlying kind of experience that one can have acutely for a period of time or more in a chronic way. And then burnout, the World Health Organization the last year acknowledged burnout as an occupational hazard. And hopefully in doing that, it will give permission to really be able to focus on this. And this is a lot of what we do at MindWise is let's have these conversations so we can think about how to address exhaustion, how to address lack of motivation, feeling cynical and negative about work. At its core, burnout is feeling overwhelming stress to the point where it feels that it's unmanageable in the workplace. And much of that, the burnout is correlated with an environment that doesn't feel healthy, inconsistent, or maybe unclear leadership, so that there's really a lack of clear idea of what your job is and what the job role is, or what the tasks are before you. Much of that is associated with burnout. And in following up on that, mental health stuff does not show up in the ways that we expect. So from a very specific ways it could show up in the workplace is unscheduled absenteeism, presenteeism, and then increased sick days or other time off. I know. I don't want to get too much into this, Dan, because you've got a great example of kind of what you've experienced with your team in terms of how this really shows up at work. So what is presenteeism? Presenteeism is simply being there physically, whether you're on the Zoom call physically, in the meeting, in the office physically, but not really there, not really tuned in to what's happening. And so it's lack of focus, lack of organization, lack of motivation, initiation, lack of follow through. And it's particularly important to think about, is this a change from how this person, this team member, this leader typically functioned? Okay, because then it's about what's going on. How do I check in with this person to get a sense of what's this change about? And so very much want to point out, and I think it's important that we acknowledge what we're all going through right now. As Tom said when he kind of introduced this series, not only is it the pandemic that we're addressing right now, we're addressing a lot of what's going on in this country, including the national unrest around racism. And so all of us in different ways are impacted by two kind of crises, if you will. And the chronic stress has an impact on all of us in the moment. PTSD, post-traumatic stress, is a type of anxiety that people may experience after experiencing certain stressors or certain traumas. And so being part of anxiety, traumatic symptoms can look like anxiety, but are also specific and different in certain ways. So for instance, there may be flashbacks, nightmares, startle response that are specific to having survived or witnessed a traumatic event. And then again, the impact of this shows up in the workplace in a lot of different ways, shows up in our lives with our families. All of that's really blended right now, and that we're working from work. Many of us are still working from work. And so we're juggling a lot. So when we talk about this, it's very much to think about how is this impacting us as individuals, in our families, and in the workplace. So a bit of a takeaway to give you in terms of a framework of managing these during these times of uncertainty and managing the feelings that can come up is a framework that we've developed at Riverside Trauma Team called Safety, Predictability, and Control. And it's really a very straightforward, I would say commonsensical way to think about how do we bring this to our lives on a daily basis. So there's a lot of focus on physical safety right now. How do we think about safety in an emotional sense? Much of it's through self-care. Dan pointed out earlier that taking that time to say, you know what, I actually need to spend time with my family. I need to go on a walk with my friend. By self-care, I am not saying bubble baths and going on a retreat. It's really how do we build this in to our daily lives, whether it's taking lunch, whether it's actually taking time out to have lunch every day, taking half an hour to help your child with their homework or just kind of be outside with them. All of this really goes a long way for that sense of internal safety. Predictability is really about routine and schedules. And again, whether it's bringing that routine to your teams, to your families, it's how do I, even if you wake up every day and think, this is going to be a new schedule for me today, how is that going to build that sense of predictability when so much really feels unpredictable in the world and leading to the final, the control, so much feels out of our control. So very much like the saying, let's focus on what we can control. What are the small ways that you can create choices for yourself, for your team, for family members, and how can you collaborate? Collaboration is really powerful in reminding us how we have a sense of power for ourselves, but also get empowered by others. So happy to also send you follow-up, just kind of one pager on that. So Dan, really want to turn it over to you here as you've talked about your team and ways in which you've addressed some dynamics.
Yeah, cool. So the example on the screen is an example of one of our senior engineers. And when we say he wasn't showing up for calls or meeting, he physically would be on calls and meetings, but checked out. And this is someone who's many, just a super talented member of our team. And, we really couldn't figure it out because this is someone who we've had on our team for many years and have worked with for years, and a fantastic member of our staff, and we'd never seen anything like this. And what we kind of learned and kind of figured out and have since been able to correct, and it's a lesson for us as leadership, is when COVID, kind of COVID came in, the pandemic started in March, so much about how we managed was impacted. I wouldn't say it changed, but it was impacted. And we have an office in Boston where on any given day, depending on who's in or who isn't in, we have at least, anywhere from 30 to 70 people in our Boston office. People kind of change schedules. And what I learned was that with a lot of the people, we really need to step up because it was the small day-to-day interactions that we had with some of our team members, grabbing a quick coffee with someone, saying hello and checking in how they're doing every morning on the way into the office, that really was meaningful. And when that was taken away, we started to see signs of a lack of being present, and this absentee example that we're describing. And so how we solved it, and what we're really doing now is we need to make sure that every single day or week, depending on the person, we're kind of like virtually hugging members of the team and recreating those moments that really help some of the people feel important and a part of things. And while for me, I like to walk in and say hello to everybody, and now clearly I've not walking into an office as much as I usually do. I'm in today because of this call, but it's important that you kind of, it had slipped my mind that how important that was to some people, and that we need to make sure in these times of COVID, while so much has changed about our environment, it's all those little details that we need to make sure that we recreate to ensure that our team is happy and feels valued. And it's that small, sometimes that small hello every day for 30 seconds that is what makes someone feel really good and valued. And when that's gone, it impacts them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that virtual hug. I love that kind of image of that, Dan. It reminds me that our senior VP actually has a one-on-one with one of our team members, and I believe what they do, and I think it's a 20-minute kind of one-on-one, but they each walk. They're on their phone, but they're each walking. And he's just kind of said how refreshing that's been. So yeah, I think all the kind of scheduling coffees with team members, all of that, as you're saying, really checking in the way that we used to be able to do very easily when we were in person. So what you're describing, Dan, is very much psychological safety. This is going to be something we focus on in the last webinar of this series. Many of you may have heard about this. Amy Edmondson is a psychologist at Harvard who really coined the phrase, came out of a Google study that Google really wanted to look at what makes high-performing teams and what makes really productive but happy teams. Not just high productive, but what makes a team that really collaborates versus is competitive and is less productive. And one of the major finding is that aspects such as, Dan, what you've touched upon, really genuinely caring about one another, leadership, having a relationship where there's a back and forth, where there can be real feedback, opportunities for growth within the team, transparency. I know, Dan, you're going to be talking about some of this. So really that's the core and the foundation, if you will, of what needs to happen within an organization so that we can have these conversations in kind of a safe and easier way, particularly around mental health. So second poll for today, what aspect of your company has been most impacted by COVID? And I can't see these choices, but Nick, I trust that.
Yeah, it's out. It's out right now.
Everyone can. Great. Thank you.
Yep, people are voting, and I will give you a rundown of the responses once we get a few more in. People are going pretty fast.
Great. Oh, great. Thank you, Nick.
All right, we've got just about 2/3 of everyone has responded to the poll. I'm going to give it a few more seconds and then close it. So if anybody wants to respond, now's your chance. All right, so I will put these up. We have a exact third, 33% of our responses say the heightened levels of stress and anxiety across teams. 13% say feelings of job or financial insecurity, and just over half, 53% say balancing remote work with child and family responsibilities.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I think that it really fits what we are hearing from organizations and companies. And Dan, I imagine very much of what you're kind of hearing and seeing. So turning it back over to you in terms of, I think you used a phrase I really liked around meaningful leadership. So if you could kind of speak to that piece as we address this.
Yeah, first with that poll, really interesting. I mean, we're in a day and age right now. We had a child throw up on his or her mom on a meeting last week. And so I think we all just need to kind of now be comfortable with what it is. Generally, that's something that I don't think we would be too cool with, but in today's day and age, it makes for a good story. But certainly the challenges around balancing kids at home, what's going to happen with schools this fall, childcare, all wild, and so these are all things that we're always talking about and thinking about. It's been so meaningful leadership. It's been really interesting. This has been a great time to learn about people and develop leadership. We've been working. We've kind of been calling it radical transparency as to what's getting us through COVID, and we have a every other week a meeting. And the topic of it, to some extent, it's kind of got an informally nicknamed Ask Dan Anything meeting, where what we'll do is we have somebody who, through Slack, asks for questions that get submitted through an anonymous Google form, and in front of the entire company, and we'll have about 100 people in these meetings, I'll answer questions like, do we need to be concerned about layoffs? And really hard questions. But what we have found is that the worst thing we could do is keep any realities from our team. And the good news is we've had no layoffs, we've had no furloughs, we've had no salary cuts. We've been able to get through things well, but certainly in an unprecedented time, we have found that it's just really important to inform the team. I think that it helps. The feedback we've received is that it's helped the members of the team kind of with their own balance and their own idea of their stability in getting through this. And we've also seen some people step up as well and really become meaningful parts of the effort to how do we better serve each other as we get through this pandemic as well. So it's been cool. I mean, something that I usually wouldn't talk about certain details in the level that we're now talking about with everybody all the time. It's really been a positive for us, and we've gone through things. We've actually been able to do pretty well through this pandemic, and as a part of that, we've also had other people kind of emerge as leaders in their own ways.
Oh, that's great. That's a great piece about who's emerged as leaders. And really kudos to you for having that level of transparency with the Ask Dan Anything meetings. It just reminds me that a study came out in the last month or so, and this is all companies, not just tech, that 40% of employers have not addressed COVID with their employees. 40% have not even raised how COVID is impacting them. So really significant there. So related to that, Dan, if you would talk more about what you've learned about leadership, also what you just said about how folks have emerged as leaders in this process. And I also wonder what's really been most surprising to you about what you've learned about what's been effective during these times.
Well, I think that, and I would also add, I know we're talking about COVID, but I would also add that we have had a really good internal dialogue around the national social injustice conversation as well. And we've, pulled together resources. And when I say we, I mean our whole team. Oftentimes leadership needs to put out the initiative, and then people refine the initiative and really make it happen, and it takes on a life of its own. So I think we've kind of talked about two, and Tom brought up two challenges that we're all facing.
That's right.
We were very early talking about. We were ahead of LinkedIn and the posting on social media. Probably was controversial to bring up the social injustice stuff, and I again, that was something that turned out to be a very good idea, because in the Ask Dan Anything meeting, we addressed things very early. People's questions were, are we going to have a dialogue around this? So I think it was good to get ahead of it. So how's it made us better leaders? The first thing is that it's really allowed us, I think as a leader, we're really facilitators, and it's allowed us to start a conversation through these challenging situations with our team and get everybody comfortable and involved, and everybody feel like that we're working through challenging times together. I don't think people feel rudderless. I think people feel like they have purpose every day. In our company, people like the person generally who they sit next to, whether it's on their left or their right. And we've created a reason for people to kind of really come together and not feel that they're doing anything for some abstract dollar number that we're chasing, but really work together for each other to pull through something. It's moving forward. I will be more focused all the time on the little details with people. When COVID happened and this pandemic went down, I think I focused too much on, as a company, what are we doing? And we did some really cool things, and it was great. We had like wellness challenges. We had, we came up with like a company cookbook and cooking contest.
Nice.
Like we did all sorts of fun things. But really, it's bigger than that. It's making sure that like we're touching every single person. We now have days where we'll just block out the full day just to talk to every single person and see how they're doing. And I think those really matter. Little thing, we have virtual coffee dates. I get a customer call I canceled previously. Now, if I have to cancel a virtual coffee date because of a customer call, I make sure that I reschedule one that's twice as long. And so it's like those little details that really matter. We use the expression like, kind of like finding a way to give everybody a virtual hug every day and make sure that they understand how much they matter to our team and how important they are is important. The biggest surprise, I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but it's just how well people have stepped up and wanted to help each other. Back to the poll, we've got young families, and you need to take care of your kid from 2 to 5. I got your back here. Or someone who takes care of their kid from 2 to 5. All of a sudden 9 p.m. rolls around and I start to see my emails blowing up with like questions and kind of that person's back at it. And I think it's not really a surprise, but it's just been more of like an enlightening moment in my career, is how much of a how shitty and tough this time period can be, but how much of a privilege and how enlightening and joyful it is to be able to work through it with people that really care about each other and are getting through it together as a team.
Yeah. So Dan, the word I kept thinking about as you were talking is engagement. You're so engaged with your team, your employees. And so it strikes me that that sense of purpose, that meaningful leadership is, and you're connecting, and it sounds like you're encouraging your team members, your employees to connect with one another. And so it circles around to their then wanting to step up. So it just strikes me that that level of engagement is core here. And again, to Tom's point at the very beginning, people are at the core of any company. And so that's really very much what you're doing, is taking care of the core of your company. And thank you for bringing up the what's going on and the national unrest, the racism, social injustice. We're very much hearing from companies that we work with around the challenges of how do we talk about diversity and racism in a respectful way, in the same way that we're trying to talk about mental health. And so we feel very strongly that the principles, the respect, the listening, the using safe language around conversations applies to both conversations. And more we're really finding it a welcome challenge to think about how do we bring those conversations together. So thank you very much for bringing that up. So just to kind of, as we start winding down, to review that from the MindWise perspective, we really think about these conversations as a starting point. This should not be, hopefully, a one and done situation. This should be the beginning of a conversation. So whatever your role may be in your organization, to think about, how can I be part of continuing this conversation, or saying, hey, it's important that we talk about this. It's important we think about, to Dan's point, how do we schedule virtual coffees? How do we have time that we just block off to check in with one another? You know, I often like to use examples from MindWise we do internally, and our leadership, for instance, has already been talking about what are we going to do in September around people's schedules, knowing that they're going to be young kids at home with parents. How do we, you know, really make the schedules work? How do we recognize some people are going to need to have blocks of time? The hours are going to change. How do we really support that and plan for that? So the culture, it's very much about the culture. And you can see here we do it through a variety of ways. Welcome to, you know, be in touch after with Dan or I to talk about any of this. I think if there have been any questions that have come in through chat or any comments, Nick, we have about 5 minutes if people want to, you know, kind of be part of this and share their thoughts and experiences.
Actually, no questions have come through yet, but maybe this is a good time to remind everybody, just drop them in the chat box, in the submit questions to staff, and it'll come through, and then I will pass them on to Lisa and Dan. Anyone wants to submit questions?
So as we're waiting,
you guys answered every question already, apparently.
amazing. That's quite amazing. Dan, any other thoughts as we wind down? So much to talk about this topic, and thank you for sharing your experiences and your insights.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think a big part of all of this, and certainly with the social injustice conversation too, is acknowledgement that we all have a lot to learn. And I think that's, you know, I think we've done a lot of things well. We have a foundation, and we're a pretty progressive group of people, but we have so much to learn. And so I would almost even flip that, if people don't have questions, even if people have you know, other things that they would share that they've done in their companies as well, that maybe we could bring up and talk about.
Sure.
But that'd be, yeah.
Great, that'd be great. Would love to hear that.
We have one question here. Dan, how do you recommend managers approach employees that they can see are struggling but may not be comfortable talking about their mental health with their boss?
So I'm going to start with a different direction and then back into that. I think that one of the most important things that a boss can do, and this doesn't answer the question, but I want to state it, is make sure that they're approachable for anything and everything. And if whether someone's going through something at home, whether even if it's something financial, if someone's got a flat tire and it's 2 a.m., you know, I want to be looked at as someone who can help. How do you approach a boss? And I think that's where, you know, I come from. So I'm probably not the boss that needs to be. I'm probably not the boss in this question, because I'm pretty easy to approach. But I think that I think that the best way to approach a boss is to be direct. I think even those bosses, and I can think of other leaders that I know and that are hard, right? And we even on our leadership team have one that's much harder than I am. At the end of the day, they should care about their people. You know, some bosses just care about numbers, and that at some point is likely a company you don't want to stay at very long. And there's probably a whole culture that's been built around that. So I think that even those bosses, I think that, and you know, it's fair. People probably are intimidated. Or it surprises me, but I think sometimes people are intimidated in approaching me. I think the best way to do it is to hit it head on. I think that you know, most you know, people in position of leadership now are aware of mental health issues and challenges in the workplace. They want what's best for their people as individuals, and ultimately they also want what's best for their company. And what's going to be best is to approach someone directly. And if I think that even if you're nervous about it, you're going to find a soft center. You're going to find you're going to find someone who's understanding, wants to help you, and wants to make sure that they're helping to connect you with resources like Lisa or someone similar who's you know, able to help you through this. And my 2 cents is if they're not, if they tell you to leave the office and deal with it and go back to your desk, I don't think that's a long-term solution. I think to some extent you've answered a bit of a question about your boss and where you're working, and maybe at that point you go to HR, you go somewhere else, but that's not your problem. So I would just, I think you just got to have the courage, take a few deep breaths, go in and be direct, and don't hide anything, don't shield anything, because people, we can be the most helpful when we have information and we have access to resources, and I think that's important. Lisa, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Very, you know, kind of on point, Dan. I would only add that I think thinking about the culture you're in, the environment, and what is talked about, what isn't talked about, your relationship with your boss. And as Dan said, absolutely, I mean, this is a completely legitimate thing to talk about with your boss. Now, if you're not sure how it'll be received, sometimes beginning with, you know, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling depressed, beginning with a low-level descriptor to kind of float what's the reaction going to be. Because pretty quickly into that conversation, as you raise it, you'll get a sense of if your boss is empathic, if they have their own tools to kind of be helpful to you, or if they're going to shut you down. And sometimes we hear that happens, that it's kind of like, well, that's not my problem, or that's on you, you figure it out on your time. If that's a response to Dan's point, because you did not get a helpful response there, is not that you didn't have a right to approach and ask for assistance, ask for support. It's then a matter of what's your next step? Where do you go next to gain support? You know, again, I throw out statistics, but 60% of employees in a large scale study said that they actually would want to talk about their mental health in the workplace or with their boss if it was needed. So you're not alone in this.
All right, we've got one or a couple more questions coming in for the next couple of minutes. Any thoughts on adjusting expectations at the team level? Obviously, as team members experience these stresses, we adjust expectations for that individual with the rest of the team picking up the slack. But are you trying to keep performance expectations high across the board or easing up a bit?
So the expectations high across the board in terms of what aspect? And just to understand that a bit.
I think I got this one, Lisa.
Sure.
Yeah, so you know, look, high expectations are I think what we're talking about are unrealistic expectations. And what do you do? Do expectations get softened? How do you handle that? I think often expectations can be unrealistic, and there needs to be conversations about how to make them realistic. So what does that mean? Does that mean adding additional team members? Does that mean extending deadlines? You know, at the end of the day, people are going to burn out faced with unrealistic expectations. And so I think it's important to acknowledge when expectations are unrealistic. And you know, how do you make expectations realistic becomes the question. And that is something that a good leader should be able to help navigate, even if that's a conversation with a customer or an investor to get to. I mean, at the end of the day, a customer, an investor doesn't want to burn a team out either, most likely, or if they do, that's problematic. So I think unrealistic expectations exist. I think they need to be talked about, why someone thinks they are unrealistic, and then plans need to be put in place to make them realistic.
One more question's come in, or we're getting right down to the wire here. It's for Lisa. Do you have any recommendations for managing stress in the office? Are team-centric activities more effective, or should leaders be encouraging coping activities for employees on their own time? Also noted, I love Dan's cookbook idea.
Yeah. So, I think absolutely addressing it on a regular basis, maybe in a team, as Dan said, checking in at the beginning around how are people doing, and really being open about the fact that we're all stressed. I mean, these are times that are not easy. There's a whole other bunch of research around, there's positive stress. We're clearly, the level of stress we're acknowledging is not positive, but to also think about, there's a certain level of what are ways that we could be motivated regarding that, but certainly supporting one another. It's especially when there's a blended or kind of remote working model. The SPC, those management strategies can really be effective. But checking in, kind of, we do a lot of work with construction, very different than tech perhaps, but they kind of in a morning huddle actually leave time to how's everyone doing? Anybody got anything they want to just get off their chest? So really bringing it out into the open.
That's it for questions. There was I think you got it answered, but to clarify on that previous question, it had been about in terms of for teams and expectations was about productivity, which I think is what you hit. And I think that's it for questions.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Dan, thank you tremendously. And Dan's going to be with us again on the 5th when we talk about valuing neurodiversity in the tech industry. Very, very excited to have you part of that conversation, Dan. Thank you all for joining us today. Hope this was helpful, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much.